Hello, Goshen Theater Drama Club fans, friends, and family. Welcome to Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks, episode 18.
Whoa.
I just did a new thing. That's how we're going to do it from now on. Episode 18, you guys. Can you believe it?
I can't.
I can't either.
We're legally adults now in the podcasting world.
Yep.
This
can
blog
vote.
can vote.
Vlog
Did
and
we-
vote.
Did
What?
you just say the same thing?
Yes.
We can vote. Okay.
Great minds. Today, our regular panel is assembled for your best possible table talk experience. We've got Miss Molly coming at you live from work. Where are you at? Miss
Yeah,
Molly?
Napanee. I'm at the Round Barn Theater currently, up in a little nook. Yeah, got
Looks
lots of work
rustic.
meetings today. Yeah, it's rustic and nice, and I'm in this big room by myself, so I feel like I can't talk too loud because people are going to hear me, but also it's fine if they do, so yep.
Exactly. And live from, I assume, Chicago, because I heard a siren. Katie B.
You are correct. What a great guess you've got there.
I'm pretty smart.
Yes, I'm in Chicago this week. I'm actually leaving for Michigan right after our table talk today, though.
Our intrepid rogue reporter, Katie B. How's the theater scene in Chicago?
Non-existent.
Excellent. And live from New
A
York.
lot of virtual things.
Live from New York. Oh, Paul Regano, how are you today?
Doing all right. Don't ask how the theater scene is here.
I won't. Oh my goodness. If you hear some tingly bells, don't worry. That's just Miss Molly.
Oh, can you hear it? Hang on, I'll mute until I have to speak.
Just that
I
Molly,
like it. It's like a background track.
It's
Molly
nice.
exists in the fairy world, and so you're just going to hear melodious tinkling around her. It's just how
That
she
would not
exists.
surprise me at all, honestly. That like Molly exists within a beautiful fairy world with unicorns and like tinkly music.
I wish. That sounds awesome.
I fully expect her to look off screen for a moment and be like, "It's all right," and then reach and be like, "Guys, a bird." A blue bird.
Come, it's time for hot takes.
Bird, what do you think?
So today is episode 2 in our back to school series. We are talking all about some of the secondary skills that you learn that make you a better person when you're doing theater and doing drama. And we're not just talking about singing, acting, and dancing and all of that. We're talking about all the other cool things that you learn that make you a better student, a better person from doing theater. If you have not joined us before, we start our episodes out with either your questions or a little hot take, and then we get into the regular topic. Today's hot take, this is going to be a little bit of a controversial one, I think. It's exciting. So there's been some recent news that some theaters in Indiana and Michigan in our local area here have been put on the do not work list for Actors Equity. And these are regular equity theaters that have been put on this list for various reasons pertaining to current events. So our hot take today is, when you are a union theater, why, like, should the union be able to place theaters on this do not work list if they aren't given an opportunity to like fix whatever the problems are? So most of the things with these two theaters in particular for the do not work list have pertained to producing theater during the COVID pandemic, because there is a national ban, and it's a very different situation in Augusta, Michigan than it is in New York or Chicago. And should those theaters have the opportunity to respond to what's happening in the local community the best way they can, or not? That is our hot take for today. Paul, what do you
I
think?
think one of the first things we have to delve into is who Actors Equity is, the Actors Equity Association, and what they do and what it means to be on a do not work list.
Absolutely.
We talked about Actors Equity in the past, and in general, hopefully our viewers know sort of what a union is if you studied your American history in the turn of the century and the Gilded Age. A union is just a group of workers who get together and say, we all want to have the power to control the circumstances in which we work. And so we're organizing together to make sure we have a voice. And so that's exactly what Actors Equity Association is. It is the actors around the country who say, we want a basic standard of living and of working conditions for any theater. And so theaters that meet those standards are equity houses or equity theaters. And actors who have worked in those, the actors union is a little different because you have to have worked in those theaters or on equity productions a certain number of times for a certain number of weeks before you qualify to join the union.
It's technically a guild, which we've talked about. So technically Actors Equity Association is an association and a guild. And the difference between a guild and a true union is that the guild does not guarantee you work and does not advocate for the individual performer getting work themselves, just like the musicians union is also a guild. But if you were in the Teamsters union, for example, there's a certain amount of work that is guaranteed by your union, or the educators union. There are people who have been suspended as teachers, but the union advocated for them and they are still technically working. They're just not working in the same capacity that they were before. So Actors Equity does not fight for your employment. You got to do that yourself. But they do advocate for the conditions when you do get a job.
And it's funny too, not only do they not advocate for your employment and you have to do it yourself, but if you don't do it, you can lose the health insurance that they offer.
Exactly.
If you don't have a certain number of weeks in a year. There's a lot of rules and stipulations. The point is, when a theater doesn't meet those standards, their equity status can be revoked. Also, without technically breaking those standards, equity can put you on a do not work list, meaning if you are an equity actor, you may not work at this theater. We do not think it is safe. We don't think it's fair to actors. We don't think it's good, whatever. And that's what we see happening right now. So that's just the background. And now the question is it a good idea?
Yeah, I think that with the current productions that we're running, that had union actors in them, to place those individual actors in a situation where they, by the union, who is not paying them, but is advocating for them, the union works for the actors, to say the Actors Equity Union is saying, don't work at this place. So they are losing their income. So they have to leave the show. Like, it puts the actor in a very precarious position because they're either going to lose their union status or they're going to lose their job. And there's no in between. So that gets me a little bit. Because I think actors in general get kind of a raw deal. Stage actors aren't as well respected as film actors in general. We also have like regional theater actors and people who work in musical theater, and we've talked about this a lot, who are kind of unsung within the theater community. There's so much emphasis on what's happening in larger cities. People don't talk about those regional theater actors. So there's all of these folks who are like troopers, literally, who are going from place to place and are taking what work they could get. And that's all of us on this chat have done this job. I don't know, if I was playing a role in a union show and was a union actor and they said, okay, you can't go to work today, I don't know what I would do. That would put me in a very, very precarious position. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I think that Actors Equity has good intentions. I think that they are there to keep us safe for those who are part of that equity membership. I am EMC, so I'm not equity, but I do have points. So that means that my foot gets into the door a little sooner than Joe Schmo on the street for an audition. But like, by a hair. So I think it's good intentions. I think that if it is unsafe for actors to be working there, then it's good that they have a no work list. That way people know that it's not up to par. I think, however, that Actors Equity does have issues and needs to be looked at and scrutinized a little bit, because you're right. those actors shouldn't have to be out of work if they feel safe. It is a personal choice. They should be able to perform without losing their actors equity membership. I don't know that the theaters deserve to get that member like that back because they broke the rules. But I don't necessarily think that, I don't know, it's hard because as an equity member, you knew that there were rules. So there is that. But at the same time, that's one of the biggest reasons why as a regional theater actress, I don't want to take my equity card because I play a lot of moms and I play a lot of old ladies and I'm not of age to play those old ladies. So like, I'm not going to find work necessarily.
Oh no.
Actors Equity shut Katie down.
They're here.
Molly Wayne comes.
I guess I could.
Oh, here she is. She's back. Oh,
I thought I heard her coming back.
there she is. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. I think that the musicians union kind of does this right, Paul, and you can kind of attest to this. Hi, Katie. Welcome back.
Hi, sorry. Someone called me and I like tried to end it.
Gross. But the musicians union, you can join the union. You still get your union standards when you do union work, but it's up to you if you do union work or you don't do union work. So if you get an offer that's from a non-union contract, you're allowed to take it. It's up to you. You do whatever you want. But in order to do union work, you got to be union.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to if you're an actor.
Exactly.
Like, unless that theater like has some kind of standing where they can bring in guest artists or whatever, like as an equity artist, you're not going to find as much regional work where we are, you know? So it's a difficult thing. And yes, those actors knew what the rules were, but at the same time, were those rules put in place before they took their contracts? And they shouldn't be penalized for that because of the time that we are in. If you can find work and you feel safe about doing it, fine. I don't think it should affect your status. I think that theaters should have status kind of revoked because they are breaking the rules by not meeting standards, but I don't know. It's a hard one. It's a hard one.
I think you're really just hitting the nail right on the head when it's for me it comes to, and what I thought of right away was also a few years ago, a bunch of shows that had recently closed on Broadway were sending tours out, and some of them were sending their tours out non-equity. Now, generally in the touring world, the first national tour has a bit of a there's some a little more
Prestige
to that title. If you went out on the first national tour of a show after it closed on Broadway, the first thing to go. So it's like very close to Broadway. It's a very nice thing to have on your resume, and it is usually an equity tour. That has not, for a long time, that just wasn't a question. And it was, not to call anyone out, it was Bandstand, SpongeBob, Escape from Margaritaville, and Once on This Island. 4 tours which went out on their first national non-equity. And I think that Once on This Island had or maybe it wasn't that one, maybe I shouldn't say. One of them, maybe, I think Bandstand had announced that they were going to be equity. I'm not going to name names. One of them had announced.
Bandstand didn't get the backing to send out the equity tour that they tried to send out.
That was it.
Yeah.
I heard something about the original cast was maybe going to tour with it, which I'm crazy excited about. What a great thing to go around. And that cast.
I saw it on tour, and they primarily cast musicians, and I was like, what must this have been like with the original people?
And it's you can like buy it. They did a pro shot and streamed it with Fathom Events. I don't know if it's like available anywhere. I think you can like rent it, but it's so good that pro shot. But those 4 tours were put on an equity do not work list, which meant equity was making rules for non-equity members. What they said was, if you are non-ec and you audition for this show and you get cast and you take this show, you may not at any point in the future join the union, which is a death sentence in a lot of ways. If you are trying to do that path, like it basically says, you're not going to work in the professional theater in New York. You're not going to
You'll never be on Broadway.
never be on Broadway. Yeah, I mean, like, so that's a big thing to hold over a person's head. That's a huge, I mean, you're holding all the cards there. And I felt like maybe the producers who decided to cut costs by not hiring equity actors so they didn't have to meet equity minimums, maybe those are the people who should be punished. And maybe equity doesn't really have the clout to punish producers because they're not the Producers Guild, they're the Actors Guild. But it felt very wrong to me to be throwing their weight around like that, punishing actors who could get a first national tour on their resume in great shows. And I know lots of people who auditioned. I know one person who went out on tour with one of the shows, and I have no idea what their union status is going to be, or what, like, I don't know how enforceable it is. But it makes me very nervous that that's something that equity would do.
Like, are they going to make people sign a piece of paperwork that says, I hereby certify that I did not do any of these gigs? And there's like how do you even enforce that? Molly, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing everything that you all have to say too, because I feel like I completely agree for the most part. It's tough, and like one of the theaters is a theater that I've worked at before, and I have all my EMC points from there, and honestly they're like family to me, so it's hard to see these types of things happen, especially when I know like all of the precautions that were taking place. Like, it was just, they were doing cabaret shows that were outside, the patrons were loving it, it was going really well. So yeah, I feel like I'm still I'm also EMC, and I feel like I'm still learning a lot about the union and how that all works and where I am at my career and kind of where I want to be in the world of theater. I don't know if going equity is something I'm ever really going to need to do or will be the right step in my journey. So I don't feel like it completely applies to me in a way. But it's sad to see theaters. I don't know. It's sad to see theaters getting a bad rep because they're trying to be problem solvers and create theater during this time. Because like we've all mentioned before, and like we talked about last week, for all those actors, it was a personal choice. Not one of those actors was being forced to perform. If you don't feel safe, that's really valid and you don't have to. But if you do, there's people that wanted to make it as safe as possible so that we could keep this business alive, because we all care about it a lot. And even if you don't agree or have a different opinion, I think that you can't shame people for wanting to do that. No one wanted to put anyone in an unsafe situation. But again, I just feel like it's a topic that I don't know a ton about because it doesn't apply to me a ton. So my initial thoughts are that, but I don't necessarily have anything beyond that. I just think it's an interesting conversation, and there's a lot of different sides. So yeah, that's my take.
I think being in the business of public events, it's hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I remember like it's a couple months ago, the Barnes hosted a hymn sing outside, bring your own chair. And they had performers that were on a stage platform, and there was like a fence area that was like a safe distance away. And I was like, what an innovative thing to do.
Yeah, which
like,
is cool. That's what theater's about. Yeah, is being innovative. And why aren't we doing that? Or, I mean, we are, but like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. What do you think, Katie?
I was just going to say also, and I think we've basically touched on it, but I want to clarify a little bit, that Actors Equity is not accessible to everybody. It's just not. Non-equity members are usually the poorest of the poor in this industry, and they are the ones that need the most protection. And yet Actors Equity is very much for the more elite of us, those of us who can pay the dues, those of us who can take those unpaid internships and get those EMC points, which is not always the case by any stretch of the imagination. I've always been paid for my work where I got my EMC points, but at the same time, we are paid lower level if we are not equity, and we need more protections as non-equity members to make sure that the places we are working are taking care of us. And instead, Actors Equity tends to make sure that the elite of us are taken care of more. And I think that's where the accessibility issue comes into play. And that's why, as a regional actress, I won't take my equity card, because there's not accessible work to me if I take my equity card. And if they would take the time to really work with these theaters in these regional areas and make sure that they are up to par and made them equity houses and made them the best they could be, I mean, we could see a booming industry. But that's not the case. And I understand that not every theater is going to meet those requirements, but I also believe that the accessibility to equity is difficult.
There's definitely an elitism about equity that is very upsetting. Yeah, I remember a few years back, there was a hashtag going around, ask if it's equity, regarding tours, if it's an equity tour, when you go to your touring house. And it was created to say, ask if it's equity, meaning are the actors treated fairly and compensated fairly, which is a great thing. And it was sort of co-opted by people who said, ask if it's equity, meaning, is it good? That non-equity means they're amateurs, that they're not good. And that really stings. And that's really not okay. And if you're non-equity and you are not protected by that union, please remember that labor laws still exist. You are protected as a worker in the United States.
There are standards.
So,
OSHA exists. Like, you can report if your fly system's unsafe, if you feel weird, if you feel unsafe in your environment, you can report your employer. You don't have to be union to do it. I think one of the shady things too about union theaters in some places, and this isn't everybody, but there's different levels of equity, and there's a League of Regional Theaters lettering system. So you're Lort A, you're Lort B, you're Lort C. So those regional theaters that are not Broadway have these levels. Each of those levels has a set of requirements for how many equity actors they hire and how many non-union actors they hire. And because of the auditioning hierarchy in the big cities, everybody wants to be EMC, which I believe everybody on this call is. No, Paul's not. Paul, I must join at this point, so you can have some of my points if you ever need them. Oh, you're over here. But the problem comes in where there are not union standards for their non-union performers when they don't have to hire all equity. So let's say you're doing a show at one of these Lort B theaters. They're going to hire 75% non-union. There is no standard of pay for that non-union performer. So the 25% union people are making the equity minimums, are getting all of their additional compensations and all of their stuff paid for. And the non-union people often don't make a living wage. So just because it's an equity theater doesn't mean that all of the actors are being paid at a level where they can function, pay their bills, eat, pay their rent back in the city, etc. So that's something also to know. Like, I have heard of recently equity theaters with a lower Lort level paying their non-union actors a $250 stipend, and then saying that they get equity points as part of their wages.
and
That's like telling someone that you get experience and like
exposure.
yeah.
No,
Hey,
so that's
actors, y'all.
shady. Well, that was a hot take, y'all. That was good. That was Molly's hot take today. It was inspired by Molly. She's great. So today, this is our second episode in the Back to School series. We're talking about things that you learn when you do drama. This next, we have like a list of a few things we're going to chat about. The first one on our list for today is super important for all of us. And I shudder to think of what we would all be like if we didn't do theater, because theater increases your ability to focus. So we would all basically be butterflies if it weren't for theater. I know that for me, like by rote memorization is one of those things that has trained my brain to be extremely focused on like the minutia of how words come together. And if you're not focused on the day when you're doing a show or in a rehearsal, you could get hurt. Like, there's things flying all over the place. You got to know what's happening and you got to be focused on the right stuff. And if you're not focused backstage, you could miss an entrance and miss a cue, you have other people you're helping, you got to stay focused. So I know that I still feel like I'm pretty sharp as a person. I think that a lot of that has to do with being a theater person. Molly, what do you think? Focus?
Focus is so important. It's so interesting to me because when I'm in a rehearsal or when I'm doing a show, I'm not thinking about anything else. And when I am, which is rare, I can really tell because I feel all over the place. Like last night was actually one of those shows for me, not for any particular reason. I was just thinking about a bunch of stuff, thinking about everything I had to do the next day. And I think I had a little bit too much coffee before the show. So I was just a little like hyperactive. And I was in the wings about to go on for one of the songs. And I was like, what are my lyrics? Like all of a sudden they were gone. And luckily I skipped out on the stage. And as I was skipping, I remembered them and then said them like a second later. But anyway, yeah. So focus is really, really important. And I guess that's all I have to say. Yeah, but I feel focused immensely in rehearsal and on stage. That applies to all parts of life.
There's this autopilot thing that happens in your brain when you do something over and over and you memorize it, because it's actually impossible. If you were to think of each individual action that you need to do something, like your brain saves things as sequences. So for elite musicians, this is something that happens. You need to have this ability to focus so that you can intellectually remember what you're supposed to be doing, so that if you get into autopilot and your autopilot fails, you don't like fall off of it. A friend of mine was in a piano lesson and was like, hey, I memorized this song. This is when he was a teenager. I memorized this song, playing it. And the teacher was like, oh, that's great. So you know this piece pretty well then? And he's like, yeah. And the teacher says, all right, the 7th bar, what's the pickup note for the 5th finger in the right hand? And he tried to he started playing, and the teacher was like, no, don't play it. I'm not asking you to play. I'm asking you to tell me what the note is. And then he started thinking, and they were like, no, just tell me what the note is. Don't think through the piece. Don't count things. I want you to tell me what the note is. And he realized that he didn't actually have the focus to remember what those things were and didn't really know it that well. And I think theater can be the same way. You have to really be focused on what you're doing in order to really know what's going on. Paul, what do you think?
I think that memorization example is such a good thing. When I'm music directing a show, when I'm playing a show, I frequently feel like I could probably take the score away at this point. It's muscle memory, and I know the cues, and I know the show really, if I've been doing it for long enough, and I keep the score in front of me anyway. And sometimes, and it's not a question of maybe I'll forget it. It's more a question of part of the muscle memory is seeing it on the page and translating it. And there have been times when I have accidentally looked at the wrong staff and my fingers went into the muscle memory, and I looked down and I looked at the staff and I was like, that's not supposed to be a D flat chord. And it threw me. Yeah, I think part of what, it's a special kind of focus too that we have, which is not just focus on one thing, but focus on one's surroundings. If I know, I have to know not only I do this and then this happens, or this happens then I do this, but also this happens so that I can do this so that this can happen, and then later that person has to do this other thing. And it's about being aware of the whole, and that kind of focus, that's the kind of thing that even if you're not a lead in a show, every single person has their track, knows how their track affects everything else in the production. Everything from the soundboard up to the fly operator to the ensemble member. And you have to know that. And then you get the fun crazy nights where one thing goes wrong, and it could be minuscule and the audience could never know because everyone is so focused that everyone knows what has to change. And I'm starting to go into our next point, so I'll leave it at that. But that, I think, is a very important thing, that it's 2 hours of straight focus to do this. Aside from any physical exhaustion that you feel at the end, you are mentally exhausted as well.
Yeah. What do you think, Katie? Has theater increased your ability to focus? What do you think?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we deal with crying babies, cell phones going off, people coughing. Like, it could be the most dramatic moment of the whole show. You could be the lead, and something in the audience will happen. And you can't just fall out of it. Like, you're not Patty LuPone. You can't go tell that person to turn off their phone. Are you crazy? You're not at her level. So you just keep going. So yeah, I think it's just amazing because, you know, even when you're not on stage, you are in tune with what's happening. So at Round Barn Theater, the Barns, I believe is now what it's called. I worked there a few different seasons, and I did Plain and Fancy a lot, and I played the same character every time. And I had a backstage path. I knew exactly when I had to leave my dressing room to go preset whatever needed to be preset. I knew exactly who I would pass at what time. You have a track even when you are not on stage. You are choreographed. You are. Whether you want to look at it that way or not, you know that you have to leave at a certain time to make sure that prop is set, to make sure that car goes on stage correctly, whatever it is. You have a full show even when you are not on stage because you are intricately attached to everything that happens in your show. So it's not just being focused on stage and making sure that you don't break because something happens in the audience or your partner on stage loses their line or whatever you have to cover. Like, you are so in tune, you don't lose it. And the whole thing is you have to know your story inside and out. You have to know everybody's track in a way, because there's been times where you go to do that backstage track, you go to pass who you normally pass, and they are not there. And you know that if they don't get there by a certain time, something's going to go wrong on stage. And so you make sure that they get there on time. You just go, hey, and you make sure they know what time it is, kind of situation, without being that person that is rude or anything like that, that oversteps that bound. But you know if something's going to go wrong on stage. You have to keep focused and keep in tune with the show, whether you're on stage or not. So multitasking, y'all.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Paul?
No, that's just such an important aspect that you bring up too, is being in tune with the audience and still being in the moment of the show. Not just making sure your show doesn't get stale and that you stay alive, because people come to see live human moments on stage, but that it is you're playing off the audience and people want to see that. So you have to be both aware and shut off from. It's a tall order. Not everyone can do it.
It's very true. So, Paul, you were alluding to our next point on our list
Right. And
within the focus discussion.
yeah, I think Katie brought it up a little bit too, is that the skill of nonverbal communication. Especially if you're on stage, if you do not have a line, but you need to communicate something to someone else, you need when I say nonverbal communication, I mean conveying information, but also receiving. You need to be aware of those things, and backstage as well. There's a lot of whispering and nonverbal cues there. There's a lot of body language to be read. There is a lot of, and I mean, Molly can definitely talk about this more too. But as a dancer, you need to be reading nonverbal cues constantly.
Yeah.
And I'll hand it off to Molly for that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like I've had entire conversations with people, like, through looking at them on stage. Especially if you're dancing, there's a lot of trust involved. If you're doing a lift, if you're doing something, or a set piece is moving and you also have to do something and trust all of your other actors, if you can see that something is wrong, that would be a really good cue for me to maybe know, oh, I might have to modify this move, because if I do it the way I'm usually going to do it, I might get hurt, because I can tell that they're not ready for this lift, or I can tell that, like, they need to go deal with something else on stage or something like that. And oh man, I had one other point now. I feel like I forgot what it was. Yeah, I've said this before, and I think I said this a lot in the Healthy Artist episode, but our minds and our bodies are so connected. And that's like one of the main things that I've learned through theater and also through fitness and kind of combining the two. And so learning on stage how to read people's cues, it's just a really interesting thing when you literally cannot say something to someone because you're on stage in the moment of a show, but you have to get them to understand something that's really important that might be about to happen. It's a really valuable skill, and it comes into play a lot in real life as well. Even if like you're in the workplace and you notice someone is closed off, or like they have a certain look, or like they need something, there's just it applies to every relationship in real life. I think it's a really valuable skill.
What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, everything you guys just said. We are observers of life. We have to be to portray all these different characters. So we naturally, in our everyday life, we are observing people. And that works to our advantage. We're very empathetic people. So we know people's body language. And so in everyday life, we know when something's wrong with people, and we can use that ability that we have as actors and performers to go and talk to that human, whatever it is, extend the hand. On stage, it's very much about that focus and that ability to know if something's wrong with your scene partner, and how can you help in that moment without breaking character, without taking away from the story. And I always go back to Waist Watchers when I was doing it here in Chicago. And I have really bad knees from dance and gymnastics over the years, and being a catcher for 13 years in softball. I have terrible knees. They're gone. They've gone out of whack multiple times in dance calls. Like they're done. My ankles are not good. They've always been weak ankles. Dance was difficult. Gymnastics was difficult growing up because I was always injuring myself. But I'm used to working through that pain. There were multiple times I was a swing actor for Waist Watchers, so I would go in for other actors all the time. And I would be on the opposite side of the stage and not used to their stepper or whatever. And there were multiple times my ankles would give out and I would land face first on the stage. And one time I fell into the lap of a patron in the first row. And at that time it was really bad. And I don't know how the other actress, the other three ladies were on stage, but one of them, all of a sudden she was there and she was ready to help me up. And I did not know that she had the time in the routine to come do that. And she didn't. I know she doesn't. She just appeared and just was there to lend a helping hand. But I used it as a character. I drug my body to the center of the stage for the next part, crawled my way over as if it's like a gag, grabbed an arm, pulled myself up, and then modified the rest of the dance. But that actress, she knew I'd had other injuries with my ankles on that show. This was not the first time the steppers had been an issue for me. And she knew that I had gone down, and she was there in an instant, and it worked so well because she's the instructor of the gym that we're working out at. Like, she is the one that should help me. And she did. And it was just an amazing feeling because I didn't realize anybody even knew I went down except for that poor audience member in that area who I fell into their lap. I mean, I knew the audience knew because you can hear the gasp. But I got up and we just kept going. And then I cried backstage a little bit before I went back on because my ankle hurt so bad. But whatever it is, you've got to be in tune. You've got to be willing to help your actor friends on stage, whatever it is. And that comes with nonverbal communication. They knew that I could make it through the rest of the song. They didn't have to cover for me. I was going to make it through somehow, and then we'd figure it out. And as soon as we were all off stage, they checked in. My stage manager came back to check on me, and we figured it out. It was fine. But it's all about nonverbal.
It is.
Be
I think the other thing too, and not just as a mode of communication between performers or as a way to express something that's wrong, off stage, Michael Chekhov, who is a movement-based acting method founder, really, he came up with a bunch of completely nonverbal forms of communicating. And here's an example of one that's in one of his books. That is the motion of someone getting an idea. If I go, you know what that is, and there's a certain set of movements that go with that, and I don't have to say, I have an idea. Like, that's the cool thing. So Michael Chekhov has all of these different ways that people look at the body and can see different ways that you're trying to communicate things with them. Like, there's particular postures that communicate things. There's particular ways that you tilt your head that communicate something. And actors become masters of this form of nonverbal communication. So not just as part of, oh, something's wrong, but also as a way to support the storytelling, which I think is really, really cool. Because, like, Molly, we've talked about this. Like, how much did Bob Fosse communicate without using any words? And, like, you could get entire narratives from things that he was doing without using a single word.
It's so interesting.
Yes.
I love all this stuff so much. It's amazing.
And speaking of Bob Fosse, segue. Another thing that we
Segue.
get. Oh, Paul has one thing.
Oh, sorry. And Amber, I just love everything you said about Michael Chekhov. I think he's amazing in general. Look him up, friends. If you're an actor, look up Chekhovian work. Michael Chekhov, not his brother, cousin, uncle, whoever,
His
Anton.
Uncle Anton. Don't.
I didn't know they were actually related.
He's rubbish. Anton Chekhov, don't even worry about that. Something about a cherry orchard, who cares? Blah, blah.
They're comedies. You have to be told that because they're not funny. Sorry. But nonverbal communication. Stephen Lefbeck, who wrote Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, before he was doing that, I mean, he was writing for years, and he's been a composer for many years, and he's written shows, other shows besides the one that made it to Broadway. But he was doing he did a lot of cabaret work throughout his life, and still does, I'm sure. And he was doing a show, I'm not going to remember who the person he was performing with was, but she was he was a little younger, and she was much more experienced. And they were doing the show, and it was they were doing 2 sets. And at the intermission between the 2 sets, he was talking to her, and he said, "Man, they're not digging it. They don't like us. They're dead. They're quiet out there." And she said, "Don't listen to the audience. Feel the audience." And he said he was absolutely right. And he said for the second half, he was really feeling that out rather than trying to listen. And at the end, they got standing ovation.
Paul, I'm going to turn this next one over to you. This one is about receiving constructive feedback. I'm going to let you do the introduction because I'm going to say goodbye to some people that I love here for a minute. Ready? Say hello. Ready. These are some actors and theater people from Cincinnati. So maybe we'll have them on a table talk to talk about, like, theater scenes in other regional theater communities. Doesn't that sound fun? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. But yeah, Paul, you take this one. And I'll be right back. BRB.
So yeah, we're going to talk about receiving constructive criticism or constructive feedback, really, which doesn't have to be critical. And I think it's something that is necessary in all facets of theater. So I'll talk about as a musician, I have to be ready for someone. The first time I ever got mentioned in a review as a professional music director was, and I quote, "Move the band to the back area where they currently drown out the singers." No mention of my name, but that was it. That was the only mention of the band. Not if we were good or bad, just that we were too loud and we had to be moved, according to this critic. We need a thick skin. We need to be able to hear things. We need a director to come up. I need to be able for a director to come up and say, "Hey, in this section, it's just too slow. You got to pick up the tempo. We're losing the audience here." And I can't let my ego get in the way, and I can't feel like it's a personal attack on me. I had to do what's right for the show. Katie, as an actor, talk to me about receiving constructive feedback, which you have to do a lot.
We do. So constructive criticism, notice constructive. That means it's there to help you. I think it's so very important to take a note. All right. So you take the note, you say yes, and you do whatever the note was from your director, right? They've got the vision. They're there to guide you. You take the note. That is your job as the actor to help that vision come through. Now, if you have questions, you can ask those questions for clarification, whatever. That's great. Directors love clarifying things for you. However, take the note. because criticism can be two things. It can be constructive or it can be destructive. And it's a hard thing in the theater world because you hold your breath for those reviews to come out when you're doing a show. You want to see your name in print. Don't lie. You want to see good things about yourself. You want people to come see your show. The problem is that if you don't receive the best feedback in that review, it can become very destructive to you. I've been in a show before where our lead male received not even bad criticism. It was the review from the town newspaper that we were in, and it wasn't a bad review. He had gotten mentioned, and it was something to the effect of not the traditional way the characters played, but it wasn't a bad review, but it ate him alive for the rest of the run. And that review came out like the first weekend we were open. And for the rest of the run, he was so in his head and he tried to change how he had done the character. We loved how he had been doing the character. Directors loved how he had played the character. They chose him for a reason. He was an honest actor. And all of a sudden, he was playing it for the laughs. And it lost its honesty. And the rest of us knew what was happening. And there's nothing you can do as the actor on stage with them. There's literally nothing you should do. It's not your job. If the director has a note, they can take the note to them. But unfortunately, he let that criticism become destructive for him. He didn't look at the good, he saw the bad. So just like in school, grades in school, constructive feedback. Think of it as taking a note as an actor, all right? So if your grades are not where you want them to be, go ask your teacher, what is happening? How can I fix it? Look for that constructive feedback. And like a good actor, take the note and then try and do better the next time.
Yeah, I think
Don't let it be destructive.
a lot of what that constructive feedback is somebody giving you a compliment that they think you have the potential to do something better. If they didn't think you had that potential, they would not give you the feedback, because it takes a lot to give someone constructive feedback. That's A. And B, they're not saying something to you about how you're not a good person or you're not talented. They're saying this specific thing, I think maybe it's not reading the way that you think it is, or it doesn't work with what someone else is doing. It's not about, like, someone giving you a note doesn't mean you're bad at your job. And I think actors get that way more, especially young actors and student actors understand that principle so much better than their cohort of peers, because, like, you get there, you get it, and you realize that it's not about you by yourself. And it's such a good life skill. What do you think, Molly?
Yeah, I think that this is such an interesting thing to talk about too, because it really happens so much, especially when you're an actor. But I think it's really important that when you're getting constructive criticism, when it's coming from the right place and the right people within the creative team and the creative process, and this is leading to one of our next ones, so maybe this is a segue too, but I know collaboration is on our list somewhere as well. And I think constructive criticism is one of the most important parts of collaboration. When you know how to do it in a healthy way that honors the vision of the show and that honors the people you're working with and the line of kind of where the authority is and kind of who we're going to listen to. One of the good points that Katie made is that as an actor, you should not be giving another actor notes ever. That was actually one of the first things that I learned as a kid at Round Barn. I remember, like, everyone saying that. I even remember once there was an actor that was like, hey, I think you're actually supposed to be doing this and this, and I heard the other actor say, please don't give me notes, which I think is the correct response in that situation. So for me, it's really interesting because a lot of the times I'm playing a role in the show, and I'm the choreographer. So I have a little bit more authority than usual. Like, I do have the ability to give notes on certain things, but that's hard for me. I think that for me as an actor, and now as someone who is like on the creative team side of things and learning how to do that and really learning more about that process right now, it's hard for me to give constructive criticism. That's something that I'm learning about myself. So it's something I'm constantly working on. But yeah, within the theater atmosphere, when it's coming from your director, choreographer, any of the designers, then it's cool. It's just really magical, because when everyone is like, oh yeah, wait, that is a really good idea, when you have the same goal in mind, which is the show, then it can be one of the coolest parts of collaborating.
There's one kind of feedback that we get that we haven't talked about that I thought we might touch on. And that's something that plays into the rest of it, and one of the reasons why actors need to be so good at receiving criticism and why actors need to be so good at need to have such a thick skin. There's one kind of feedback that we get all the time in this business, not when we're working on a show, and that is just getting a no and not getting cast, and getting used to being told as much as you are a valuable person and you have inherent value as a human being, you are not right for this thing. And being able to hear that a lot is something that really builds up your immunity to criticism.
I think it's an important thing too, to experience disappointment. And theater does really teach you how to experience disappointment in a very interesting way. But it also, on the flip side of that coin, has the potential to give you really fulfilling and uplifting moments because that roller coaster, it's a wide swing. If you were working in an insurance office doing filing, you're never going to be that disappointed. But you're also never no one's going to applaud you for knowing the alphabet and being able to do that filing really well. That's one of the trade-offs with theater, is that, yeah, the lows are low, but the highs are high as well. And I think if you can even both of those out, if the applause doesn't go to your head too much and the criticism doesn't go to your heart too much, you end up in a really good, humble middle ground. And if you're a student and you are doing theater, you're already developing those skills to make you a much better adult. So humility was never one of my strong points. So obviously everyone on this call is an incredible person, because we've all trained ourselves to be in that nice middle ground through doing theater our entire lives. Molly brought this one up, and this is, Miss Katie. Yes.
I was just going to say one more thing,
Yes.
Which is to say, know what your healthy boundaries are and what is acceptable criticism to be had. Mm-hmm. Constructive criticism, absolutely fine. Constructive criticism means that is something you can actually change and do better at. Things like, you need to lose 10 pounds to play this role, is not constructive criticism. It is an unhealthy environment, and feel free to call them out on that. Because that is not constructive criticism. That is unhealthy standards, and it's not okay. Just so we're out there.
Absolutely. And there are some things and maybe that's a good topic for another episode, Miss Katie, is the ways that you should be treated when you are in theater, because there is often, people do take advantage of the fact that we are so open to improvement that they take those opportunities to tear us down in ways that are not acceptable. But those theater producers and directors and agents know better. They know better. But alas, it is the business, and that's the way that it is. But that's an excellent point. But Miss Molly was bringing up one of the best parts of our next topic is the ability to receive constructive feedback from people that you're in shows with or that you are doing projects with, and that's collaboration. And I think one of the cool things about this group in particular is that the people on this call are some of my favorite. There's Ryan. Hi.
Hi, guys.
Are some of my favorite collaborators that I have ever worked with. Collaborating on Drama Club, collaborating on productions. I think that it's not a coincidence that we also collaborate on this table talk every week. So I'm interested in what you guys have to say and what you guys think about the ability to collaborate and how that skill kind of gets built through theater. What do you guys think?
Collaboration is my favorite part of theater.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Me too.
The heart and soul for me. Because when I was younger, I thought I'm going to do it all and I'm going to be a one, you want to be the person. I have this grand vision of what I want my art to be. And that you cannot, don't think that you can. Even Lin-Manuel Miranda works with other people, and he does a lot of things. He stars in his shows and he writes his shows and he writes amazing Pulitzer winning shows. But he works with other people to do it. And right now, certainly, as my main focus is my writing, I'm very lucky that my collaborator happens to share the same parents as me. And we had, before we started writing, we had 17, 18 years of practice communicating and understanding each other's communication styles. So there was no learning curve for our rapport of, for our how we communicate. And we've gotten to a place now where David can write down a lyric and I'll be like, that's not going to fit. And I don't like that. I can play a lyric and he'll be like that. Or I can play a lick, a chord, something. And he can go, that sounds cheesy and stupid. Don't do that. And again, the ego is stripped away. It's really just about what serves the art best. And I feel like I have brought that to other productions when I'm a music director and a director says to me, I hate the music here. And I have to understand that he doesn't mean you're doing a bad job or I hate you. And I have to hear what that director is saying, and they're saying something needs to change so that it can. Again, I think this ties into what we were just talking about, the feedback, and everyone understands in a true collaboration that it's not that their job is not to be the best, to make the best thing for themselves, to be the best vision of what they think they want to do. It's to serve the piece that we're making.
Yeah, I think one of the crazy things is that we're listing collaboration here as a skill. And it's easy to forget when you're a theater person because we have to collaborate with all of the technicians and directors and the artistic vision of the producer and all, like we have to collaborate in order to make our work. So it's hard to remember that collaboration is hard for some people. So collaboration as a skill that is developed through doing theater with people, it's not an automatic thing. So maybe a lot of like the fellow students or the cohort of like our campers or some of our viewers, they might have a more underdeveloped sense of collaboration. And it's a fascinating thing how like I look at this, I'm like, okay, yeah, collaboration's great. I love doing it. I don't think, oh, being able to collaborate is a skill that you develop.
Very good point.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
What do you think, Miss Molly?
I love collaborating so much. I think it's so cool. I think you just learn so much about people too. But like at the center of theater, especially when you're on stage and you're in a scene or there's two characters, at the center of theater is listening and responding. And I think so many amazing things happen when you have so many great creative minds in one room and creative actors and everyone listens to each other and responds to each other and creates the best show possible. I feel like some of my best ideas that I've had because someone else on stage has done something that has made me respond to it differently. I don't know if that makes sense, but if I did theater by myself or if I was just a choreographer by myself, I don't think I'd be very good at it, quite honestly. I think I owe everything that I've learned and like everything that I do on stage and put into a character or put into a piece of choreography to the people I am working with. And I think that is one of the coolest parts about theater, and then we get to share that with an audience, and so it's almost a collaboration with the audience as well because their energy feeds into us, and we mentioned that a little bit earlier. So it's really just a humanity collaboration. I feel like that's what theater is.
How would you even do choreography without collaborating? Like it's just
honestly,
you
I don't know.
by yourself in a room, like
yeah.
It's an intrinsic
And
part
usually
of it. Like
that's how, yeah. That's how I usually start off is like, I'll just be listening to the song a bunch and I'll come up with things. But without a doubt, everything that I do choreography wise changes once I'm in the room teaching it to actors, because then I can see it and then I can see like how other people move and I'm like, oh, that doesn't work. And honestly, the hardest part of choreography for me is just coming up with the initial draft, because I always feel like it's terrible and I always know it's going to get better and I just can't, and it won't get there until I'm in the room. But yeah.
What about you, Miss Katie? What do you think?
Well, as an honors kid, I always hated group projects in school because I always did all the work. So hated group projects. But what's interesting is that theater, we are a team, and without every single person on that team doing the function that they are supposed to be doing, we will not succeed with the show, right? That's our game, all right? We're the football team. We're about to go out on the field and win this game, but not if our kicker is out doing something weird on the 10-yard line and we're at the 50. Like, you can't have people who are not invested. The point of this is to say, we don't always like everybody that we work with. There are people I've worked with on shows that I would not have been friends with outside of the show.
Hey,
Period.
don't talk about me like that. I'm right here. Don't talk about me like that.
Sorry, it's time to be honest.
Collaboration is about honesty.
But what's amazing about theater is you have a love for every human on that stage, a respect, a tying knot that ties you all together to get this show on its feet. And without that, every single person, it's not going to happen. We come from all different walks of life. We come from all different backgrounds, all different educations. We may not all be on the same levels on different talent-wise. Like, I'm not the best dancer in the room, but I can dance. But the point is through teamwork, through collaboration, we take all of these people who are so vastly different and we put out a product that is great every time. It, no matter what, it's never failed that something comes out of it and it's beautiful. That opening night, that feeling of accomplishment that you guys actually crossed that starting line, really, because you've been working out, you've been prepping for this race. You're crossing that starting line. You're finally starting your race and you're starting it as a team and you're going to get through all the hurdles together. And it's just a beautiful moment of collaboration and teamwork when you hit that opening night of a show. And you never get used to it. You never do.
So many sports metaphors.
Yeah.
Yes, I am the sports person. Sorry, I'm missing sports. Like, I understand sports are happening, but it's not the same.
You should watch the marble races. There's a YouTube channel that does, it's a marble racing tournament. And I know that sounds lame, but it's amazing. You should watch it.
That sounds like something my fiance would like.
Yes.
And that I would catch him watching and just be like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Those are marbles.
Katie, I think the word that you were kind of like sort of circling around a lot was trust. That's I think what collaboration, as soon as I was done talking, I was like, that's the word. That's what it ultimately comes down to, is trust in another person. The ability to say, I can only take this so far and I'm giving this to you and I understand that we are doing the same thing, we're working together. And it takes a lot of trust to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a professor who used to say that we were emotional warriors on stage. You have to make yourself so vulnerable and you're doing it as a group. And it's your safe place. And there is such a huge trust net within that group. And it makes anything possible.
Yeah, I think this actually goes right into our last topic for today, which is accountability. So the thing about trust and the thing about collaborating is that you're now accountable for your actions, for showing up, for being focused, for communicating, all of those things you are accountable for to your fellow performers and to yourself. And I think that one of the best ways that you can show that accountability is when you're able to take constructive criticism and say, yeah, you're right. I'll do better. I'm accountable for that. I should have done better. I now see what you're saying and I will do better than that. And you have to be accountable to the people that are in a show with you because of that trust, because of the way that you must collaborate with each other. And dedication, like developing the skill for dedication, was another thing that was on this list, but I feel like we have touched on that so much. Like, you have to be dedicated to the craft. You have to be dedicated to everybody else that's in a show with you. So I feel like that one is, we've discussed it. So moving on to accountability, I think that, like, as a performer, Rosie has something to say. As a performer, I really learned accountability as a performer, because I used to think that if you were accountable for something, it meant you were going to get in trouble. So I didn't want to take accountability. And I realized through theater that when I took accountability for something, like if I had done something wrong, like moved somebody's prop or didn't put something back or wasn't on my game and didn't do what I needed to do, I realized that if I wasn't accountable for it and I refused to take accountability, people still kind of knew or understood that I had done something wrong. But by taking accountability, people retained their respect for you. So I think it's important that like accountability and respect kind of go hand in hand. So that is like, I learned, yes, that is mine. I learned accountability through theater. And I think that is definitely a skill. So have you guys had any similar experiences there?
Yeah, I think the first time that I was in a position of authority, the first time that I started music directing, maybe not the first time, because I was very luckily, I was kind of eased into it in lower stakes productions. But the first time that I was like really being taken seriously as an MD, and I said like, when this show opens, everyone on stage has to know what they're singing and has to be confident that they are singing, and has to be confident that I'm going to support them musically, and the band has to be confident that I'm going to lead them. And it's all, if anything musical goes wrong, save for an act of God, it is my responsibility, and I am accountable to that. Accountable for that. There's something I think that's kind of freeing about it. If you say, this is my role, these are the things that I know I need to do, and if I don't do it, it's on me. And if something outside of this happens that messes up the production, it's not one of my things and it's not on me. Not to say like, not my problem, because that's not being a very good collaborative artist. But if I say I have to do X, Y, and Z, and I do X, Y, and Z, and then a set piece falls down and smushes an actor, I still did X, Y, and Z. And I feel more confident when my role is clearly defined, when I know that I can do it, even when I don't know that I can do it. I've been given things and someone said, you have to do this. And I thought, how do I do that? And they go, you have to do it, you know. When the roles are clearly defined and I know what I have to do, I feel so much more empowered to get that done. And I feel like the production is in a better place when everyone feels that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Katie, what about you? Have you learned more accountability through theater?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you have already said, Amber. It's literally not breaking the trust of those that you are responsible for in that moment, you know? Like, don't touch other people's props. Like, it's not yours, don't touch it. Because it can mess up things. Like, people panic. They have a set routine backstage. If you move something on them, they know their track. You've just messed up their choreography backstage. They don't know where to go now because their stuff is missing. They're in a panic. They're going to miss their entrance. Whatever it is. Like, it's good to be helpful. It's good to be focused and in tune with everything and make sure that you're there to help if needed. But it can be detrimental if you don't take accountability for your actions. If you do something wrong, always own up to it, because you don't want to break that trust. You don't want to be the person that causes the show to become rocky because you forgot. Okay, for instance, when I'm teaching children, usually I have a week with them to get their show up on their feet. And when Wednesday, Thursday hits, if they are struggling hardcore, they get a speech from me that says, hey guys, don't forget that tomorrow, Friday, is your final dress rehearsal, and then you have a show. And don't forget that we're not going to be out on stage with you. Like, I'm not the one that has to perform for your parents. You're the one who has to perform for your parents. So if you're not writing down your notes, if you're not practicing at home, if you're messing up choreography after I've already fixed it 5 times, we got to have a heart-to-heart, a come to Jesus meeting, because you're the ones that's going to look a fool out on stage for your parents. So take accountability for yourself. Now, my accountability is the fact that I am their director and I will literally die before I let them fail. So if that means I'm backstage with the script in my hand, off stage whispering lines, that means that I'm there to help them. If it means that I move every set piece for them because they can't seem to remember to go move it, that's what I'm doing. That's my job. My job is to make sure that they have a show. But there's only so much I can do. At some point, I have to pass the baton. It's up to them to really get it on its feet. That's where their accountability comes into play. So, Amber, I think you nailed it. I don't know why I have to tell stories, but there you go.
They were great stories.
Yeah. I
Also,
think
the way you talked about like the hierarchy of accountability. That if something goes wrong, if something goes wrong for someone who is under your purview, your responsibility, your whatever the word I'm looking for is, then that is accountable to you.
yeah, and to teach others accountability because it is your job to be accountable for that piece of the puzzle for them. Like that's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing to be responsible for someone else developing the ability to be responsible.
Yeah. I literally have barely anything to add because everyone hit the nose on the head. But or is that wait? I don't think that was the phrase. Hit the hammer
Hit
on
the
the
nail on the head.
hit the nail. I knew it started with an N. Anyway, that I'm
Look,
like
y'all,
cracking
I'm always
myself up now.
tired, okay?
This is true. This is true. Yeah, I guess the only thing I was going to add that like I think one of the important parts of accountability that I think Katie mentioned this a little bit too is like not only being responsible for getting something done, but on the flip side, when you don't get it done, taking that responsibility and knowing that that's yours to be like, hey, I need to own up to this and, you know, that sort of a thing. I'm going to stop talking now. So I haven't had enough coffee yet today. And yeah.
No, I think that you're absolutely right, and it's accountability is one of those grown-up skills. As a culture, we teach children to not get in trouble, so children are not taught accountability, and I think theater is one of those ways where you are responsible to others, and you're responsible to yourself. You're responsible to your parents as well, who are paying for you to have whatever experience, and even as grown-ups we're learning those skills, and as adults it's not something that comes naturally to everybody. You don't like you have to put yourself out there and trust uh, when you take accountability for things, and as a leader you take more accountability for you take more accountability for things that you didn't do than you ever thought possible, because you have to take responsibility for your team. So if you are going to be a leader, if you are going to be like in management, or if you have things that you want to accomplish, like you have to be able to be accountable and take responsibility even when your direct actions weren't a part of something that goes wrong. So I think, yeah, it's a skill that is learned. What were you going to say, Katie?
I was literally going to bring up, you mentioned that you used to, as a child, feel like taking accountability was you getting in trouble. As a child who had huge anxiety about getting in trouble, like so important for parents, teachers, any adult, if you have a child in your life, to start teaching them now the difference between getting in trouble and accountability, because they are two different things and one is so important. And fear of getting in trouble should not hold someone back from taking accountability. That's how we get into the messes we get into, because people don't know how to take accountability. So start explaining the difference now and really hone that skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick story. When I was teaching, one of my favorite teaching stories, there was a kid who had a lot of energy, good kid, but couldn't really like sit down and focus for very long. Wanted to be commenting, wanted to be talking with other kids. And look, I was a pretty rambunctious kid myself, so I get it. And I gave him a few warnings, and I said, when mom comes to pick you up today, we're gonna have a talk. After several warnings of that, so mom came to pick him up, and I pulled him aside. Everything was great today. We did have some listening issues, and as soon as I said we were gonna have a talk with his mother, like he shut down, terrified. As soon as I mentioned something to his mom, he started crying. And the mother, I will never in my life have I seen parenting this good. Sorry, mom and dad. Amazing. She was like, no, we're not going to cry. That's not what this is about. Something happened, and we are identifying that something went wrong, and we're going to fix it. And I was standing there like, beautiful, beautiful parenting. Almost brought me to tears.
Amazing. I love it. So yeah, in conclusion, there are so many things. I'm so glad we took some time to do these back to school episodes. There are so many things that are grown up skills that you guys learn from doing theater that are not just the stuff that you think of when you do theater. I can firmly say that being an actor, being a performer, and being an artist shaped me into the person that I am today. Character, commitment, dedication, all of those things. I would not have developed the skills that I have developed in my life without theater arts. There's a bunch of other secondary learning things too that happen that we haven't even touched on. So I think that if you guys have any things that you can think of at home, or like pop those in the comments or talk to us on Facebook about like things that you have experienced or learned doing theater, yeah, drop those in the comments. Maybe we'll talk about them next week. But that has been episode 18 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. We were so glad that you guys joined us today. Paul, I know you're not really a regular panelist, obviously, with the Table Talks, but next week, I don't know, it might be nice to have you around. Well, maybe not, depending on the topic, but are you interested in maybe coming back and joining us?
I think next week might be the opening of my new restaurant. We'll see. I'll see what's on the schedule, and I'll see if we can
You're
push
a risk taker in a pandemic, opening a restaurant.
I'm
You
running out
crazy fool.
I'm so good at improv. Yeah, I'll come back next week.
Great, that's awesome. As always, thank you, Goshen and Kiwanis, for your support of Goshen Theater Drama Club. Literally wouldn't be able to do this without you, so thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe, which is like a YouTube thing I'm supposed to say every time. And right now, I bet you can't hit that subscribe button in just 2 seconds. Here, I'll time you. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. Did you do it? You figure out? Maybe?
Did I find it?
It was a trick. Don't unsubscribe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we will see you next week for episode 19 of Goshen Theater Drama Club Table Talks. Thank you guys so much. We will see you next time. Bye.